Okay, so this is week 2 of English 242, so just a quick update. Many of you have already signed up for your presentations. If you haven't, please do so by Wednesday, else you will end up signed up for a presentation, and there's still 1 or 2 slots available, if I remember correctly, under week 3. And it may be that you end up getting signed up for a presentation and having to do it a lot sooner than you had anticipated. So for everyone who's already signed up, thank you very much. It helps out in my planning in terms of putting together the discussion boards if I know well in advance who's going to be doing what. The presentations, there's a description of them, of course, in the syllabus. It should be a narrated PowerPoint that takes a particular view of a story. It's almost as if you were putting together an argumentation, but you're not summarizing, essentially. Assume that everyone has read the story, only include details that inform a particular reading of the story. So you're not going to focus on every single thing, but I want you to sort of focus in on a particular aspect of the story or poem that you've read, and really sort of drill down on that, bring in critical research, etc., etc. So what you shouldn't do really is give me a couple slides on this person went to college here, they were born at this time, their parents were like this, they graduated from college at this time, and then they died of this, unless those pieces of information fit in with whatever you're trying to prove. So if you want to say, like for instance, Ernest Hemingway, a lot of his stuff is very semi-autobiographical, bring in life details and say, okay, this is the part of Hemingway's life that is reflected here. That's perfectly fine. But if you're talking about somebody like Bret Hart, not the hitman Bret Hart, but our author Bret Hart, then you would probably not really focus too much on his life unless there's something you see in his biography that specifically matches up with what you want to say. Instead, what you should be doing for your short stories is say, I want to talk a little bit about how women are portrayed in this story. I want to talk a little bit about how class is portrayed in this story. Let's talk a little bit about how socialistic ideals are portrayed in this story. Let's talk about how varying opinions of war are put into this story. And so those sorts of angles into the story, and really that's what you need to focus on. It shouldn't be a hodgepodge of topics. I read this, I read this, I read this, but rather here's the research I found that will provide you with a unique way of looking at the story that you may not have already considered. So that's the presentation in a nutshell. Again, it should be around 10-ish minutes, 10-15 minutes, and it should be in-depth, but also really focused in on a particular aspect of that story. And again, it shouldn't be encyclopedic by any stretch of the imagination. So that's basically for the presentations. This week you have 2 plays that you need to read. They're PDF files that you should be able to find on course documents. Barring that, just Google them. But the Octoroon, which is a little bit ahead of our time frame of 1865 onwards, and then also Margaret Fleming, which is a play that comes a little bit afterwards in 1890. And really what I want you to do is think about those 2 plays after you've read them and sort of think about the dramatic differences in American society from 1859 basically to 1890. Now it's sort of fudged a little bit because Dion Boucicault is actually Irish, but he will spend most of his life in America. And there's an interesting backstory about the Octoroon in which he entered that into a contest and won and got like $50 basically or something like that, which was a big deal at the time period. But in that contract he signed, it said all future profits would go to the company rather than him. And so as these things work out, the Octoroon becomes wildly popular, makes tons of money, none of which Boucicault actually sees, and he will eventually die, if I remember correctly, commit suicide, despondent over the notion that he gave this play away basically for $50, or the equivalent, whatever that time period would be. And so it's interesting to think about that, but as you think about the Octoroon, you know, there's aspects of melodrama, yet in Margaret Fleming we're seeing aspects of realism to a certain extent. How are women portrayed in these stories? There's a whole bunch of different ways of approaching these 2 plays and sort of comparing and contrasting them. And these 2 are important because later on when we get to Trifles and Long Day's Journey in the Night, 2 of our more modern plays, we can sort of take a look and say, okay, this play and then this play and so on, and sort of trace some of the evolution of how plays are written and performed in the United States, what sort of philosophies the playwrights are doing. And that's also something that may be an exam question in the future, either on your midterm or your final as well. So they're a little daunting to go into if you're stuck on these stories, especially in the first 3 or 4 weeks. I encourage you to go read a synopsis of the story first, and then take notes out of that story. Your exams will be open notes, but not open book. And so I will be encouraging you to take notes out of the stories of things that you've noticed, and then be able to put together cohesive discussion boards, quiz answers if we ever have them, and exam answers as well. So that's it in a nutshell for this week. Again, if you haven't signed up, do so by Wednesday afternoon or so, and then after that I will sign you up if you prefer. So otherwise, keep doing the work. I do know I have people for week 3. I hope my description of the PowerPoint presentations give you a little more detail, but if not, then feel free to email me as well. One thing also about the presentations on the week that you present, you do not have to do anything else that week. Obviously, I want you to read the material and respond to people if you feel that you have to, but your presentation counts as your discussion board participation for that week. So you'll see 2 grades for your presentation grade, and then you should get a straight 15 out of 15 for your discussion board participation. That's just kind of lighten the load. One other thing before I forget, your presentations need to be uploaded by Monday at midnight, and that keeps us on schedule. Any later than that, it becomes useless, because I have people sign in on Tuesday morning, Monday afternoon, Wednesday, and they're looking for that presentation, and they want to take time to look at it, listen to it, and then formulate a response on it. So if it's any later than Monday, you get booted and you don't get a presentation grade. And I had somebody last semester say, well, is there anything else I can do? And the answer is no, because everyone's already signed up for everything else. And that's going to be the case starting in week 3. We won't have an open slot. So when you do your presentation, Monday, midnight, have that thing uploaded and ready to roll. Okay. Otherwise, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I know this is a little bit longer, but we had a lot of stuff to cover, and this is in exchange for listening to me talk for an hour and 45 minutes on a regular class schedule. So keep working. The discussion boards will come on and off as we progress through the semester, and I will try to post announcements every week, either video or text.